I finally got Barry Dean. How long have I been after you now? What, 4, 5 minutes?
It's been a minute. Yes, it's been a minute. But I mean,
you've just been
just being nice.
You are so worth waiting for. You've just been so busy, and I totally get that. And we're gonna get into just how and what takes up all of Barry's time, because he's got a lot of things doing. But it has been such a delight to try to get to you, and it's one of the biggest and best songwriters in Nashville. We can go through all of the little songs, all the little hit songs that he's had, which are, you don't get to use the word plethora a lot. But Barry
I need you to call me every day. Encourage me like this every day.
Of hit songs that we'll go over, and yours has been such a fun journey to how you got there. You mean,
yeah, that's right. A little different.
Let's be truth. I mean, look up perseverance in the dictionary, and you're probably going to see that face, right?
Yeah.
For those of you who are watching on the video and stuff, I mean, you are the hopes and dreams of every small town person.
Yeah, well, that's nice to say that. But I understand that feeling of being so far away from it, and I was older too, so I'd kind of, the time had passed me, and I hadn't done that, and so I think that's all gone, and then I got to come back to it. So I like to say I'm the person happiest to be a songwriter in Nashville, Tennessee.
How old were you when you found out there was a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania?
I was pretty old. I mean, I think we knew probably, I would guess, in grade school because of the Steelers. But I didn't understand the H. I still haven't really heard why. I assume we don't have an H because we don't have enough people for it, is all I can think at the end of Pittsburgh. But we just end a G. There was no, they're not for fancying things up. They're in Pittsburgh, Kansas.
There's Pittsburgh, Kansas, y'all. There's not only Manhattan, Kansas. I mean,
very funny. We're aspirational, and there's nothing else.
I think the tourism board is working overtime. You know,
those inattentive travelers that book their flight. Yeah.
Well, you've got. I mean, in the Midwest, if you think about it, you got Pittsburgh, Kansas, Manhattan, Kansas, Miami, Ohio.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and also Kansas City is a little iffy as well. It makes me wonder if we weren't just copying Kansas City, Missouri. So those, again, inattentive travelers would be like, I'm here to see the Chiefs and the Royals and I'm sorry, that's Kansas City, Missouri. It's just right over there.
Yeah.
So,
it's just so flat. We're just, everything kind of looks the same. So we kind of figure, really? I mean, we can call it anything and everywhere. Well, you moved to Pittsburgh, Kansas, because you started off in I can't even pronounce the name of the town in Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah. I was born in Okmulgee, Oklahoma.
See,
my dad.
Who the hell knows how to pronounce Okmulgee?
That's right. Yeah, Okmulgee. Yeah, my dad was the track coach and taught shop and those kinds of things at the Willika High School. Willika. It looks like Wilitka, sounding it out. But so the hospital was in Okmulgee, and so that's where I was born. And they moved north when I was probably 4, and the family thought they'd lost their minds going off north into Kansas, whatever hinterland that was. And it's really only like 20 miles over from Oklahoma, the border. I mean, it's barely even in Kansas. It's just hanging on.
Big city, but you'll come back. Mark my words.
That's right. You're going up to the big city. It was near Joplin, Missouri on Route 66. So perhaps they thought that was the wide way to destruction. But yeah, they went up there and I don't remember a lot of it, but I do know we moved up there.
What do you remember? Because I'm from a small town. I'm from a little small town called Florella, Alabama. I mean, and it's probably...
Oh, I've driven through there.
Yeah. Most people have on their way to somewhere else. That's what Florella is. We had the little radio station I worked out there. We called ourselves, AM 1230, the gateway to the Gulf Coast, which is
nice. That's on. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds nicer than, hey, wave as you drive by.
That's a gateway.
I tell you the story. They have I've said this story before. They have a big fireworks shop. It used to be a gas station, but now it's a big year-round fireworks shop called Betty's Fireworks for the best bang in town.
Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh. How has that not been immortalized?
It does. Luke Bryan stops there all the time.
Does he really? How about that?
Yeah, just people who still live there. I remember when Luke first stopped, people were sending me pictures. Jared, look who's in Florella. And so when I Luke, I'm like, dude, you really stopped at Betty's Fireworks? And he goes, yeah, we were on our way to Destin and I had the kids and I wanted fireworks. And, it's hard to park a bus on the side of the road, which is where the fireworks stands are down there. You remember from Oklahoma, it's nothing but fireworks stands. And he goes,
that's right.
He goes, but they had a place where we could park the bus. And I said,
oh my God.
I said, how much did you spend there? And he looks at me, in that Luke Bryan way and said, a lot.
Stocking up, was he?
Yeah, a lot. We filled the bus up, partner.
Wow.
So
I can just hear him. We filled the bus up.
Yeah. His claim is that,
and they all think you sent him there. They're all like sending you, thanks for sending.
That's the beautiful thing about it is because maybe it's like my son said one time. This was when he was younger, and he goes, "Hey, Dad," he goes, "Blake Shelton works for you, right?"
Sort of.
And I said,
in a way.
And I was talking to Blake. I was interviewing with him, and I told him this story. And I was getting ready to get off the air, and he goes, and I said, "Well, thanks for calling in." And he goes, "Well, I do work for you."
That's right.
And I
said,
He
would get it.
Your performance review is coming up soon, too.
That's right. We have some questions we want to ask you about.
We need some issues we need to discuss before we move to the next level.
Questionable purchases on your expense report. And
we couldn't afford you if we had to.
He put that Pizza Hut in Tishomingo on the map down there in Oklahoma, because he said, I'm going to Pizza Hut in Tishomingo. And you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's the first time that has been a thought. You know what I mean? He put it when he's there.
Isn't it kind of funny how states get hot as far as producing country music artists? Right?
That is true, isn't it?
Georgia's kind of hot right now. There was a time where Florida was hot, where you had Florida Georgia Line, you had Jake Owen, had all those guys from Florida. Alabama has had hit or miss mittens, I mean, there's a lot of people, you had Alabama and you had, I'm kind of blanking out, Emmylou Harris and,
right.
And there were a number of people who.
That's a good point.
And then Oklahoma, you had Blake.
That's right.
Miranda's not from Oklahoma, y'all.
Texas.
But you had Blake and you had Toby Keith.
Toby, yeah, for sure. And, Vince Gill's from there. And way back, you've got Reba. And before that, Roger Miller. And I mean, so we got a few. I always felt like Oklahoma was legitimate country and Western music.
You could pretty much stop right at Roger Miller. I thought he was just the damn smartest man in the world.
It's he probably is. He's definitely in my Hall of Fame. He's one of my favorite of all time. So,
did you ever get a chance to meet him?
I shook his hand, but I wasn't a songwriter yet. He played a stint at Roy Clark's Theater in Branson, and somebody mentioned it in passing. I was working in Pittsburgh, Kansas at a normal job. I wasn't a songwriter, and they mentioned that, hey, there's that guy that sings the King of the Road song. He's I think they even called the Trailers for Sale or Rent song. And he's at Branson this week for two or three nights. And I just literally took the days off and drove to Branson and saw him. Saw both shows that day, the matinee and the other one. And then afterwards, I got a picture with him and shook his hand. But I was just a huge fan. No, I loved it. And he had done Big River by then, the musical. And so, so he did some songs off that. But I remember he broke a string, and he would do a thing when he broke a string, he would take the guitar strap and do like this and set it on the ground, the guitar, and then step out of the strap, then pick up the guitar and hand it to his tech. And then when they would come back with the guitar string on it, he would put it on the ground again and bring the strap up over the back. I mean, he was just, nothing escaped his skewer. He just was going to find it.
I talked to someone who knew him and knew him on a, I can't say friendliest basis, but knew him and said he was a troubled soul. And
Yeah, I can
and
see.
his thing was, he goes, I think if you're too smart, you overthink everything. And Roger couldn't stop overthinking everything.
Boy, I bet.
The old saying of comparison is the theft of joy. I think he had a lot of that in him, right? I
I
think
could
there's
see
part
that.
of Roger that wondered, well, hell, I'm a lot better writer than them, and I can write a musical. Nobody, there's nobody in Nashville can write a musical, and I'm not a bad singer, and I'm a hell of an actor. Why?
Yeah.
Why am I not?
Why am I not thinking?
Yeah.
I could sure see it, and that's so true, right? I mean, comparison is it's. I understand. I'm drawn to it too, like everybody, but it is toxic. It'll shut you down.
Well, because I've got a 10 and a 12-year-old, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're constantly trying to go, man, you can honestly, as stupid as it sounds, choose to be happy or choose to be sad. And if you want to be sad, sit back and wonder what all you don't have, right? Choose to be happy, sit back and look at all you do have.
That's right.
Because there are some people out there who would, 90% of the world would love to be you.
That's exactly right. That's so true. Yeah, I think the social thing, somebody said the other day, Instagram sells envy. That's their product. And I thought, there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, there are people who, and it can, different seasons of your life, it can affect you more. But I could sure see where, Roger, I mean, again, I think he's genius, but certainly in that era, he kind of, and country music has, it seems, sometimes done a bad job loving our kings and queens and the people who have given us so much. I do sometimes worry that we haven't, shown them enough love. It kind of took a rock producer to bring Johnny Cash back in, and pay attention to him, and even Jack White with Loretta Lynn, and so I mean, it's we've got some great artists, and there's a guy who maybe, had he lived longer, might have had a moment again where he was really appreciated and could feel some of that.
I would love to think that. I think the best thing about country music is also a hard thing about country music. You look at I've said this before, you look at the top touring acts when it comes to rock and roll, and the majority are 70 to 80-year-old men. Because they don't change.
That's right. That's right.
We want the Rolling Stones, Journey. 60 to 80-year-old men, right?
Yeah,
because
that's
nothing
right.
changes. Well, the best thing about country music is we are constantly changing.
Moving forward,
we constantly have that new act. Well, the bad thing, and you've seen this on the award show, we find once you've won enough awards, well, you shouldn't be winning anymore. No matter what you do, once you've won enough, thanks, George. Thanks, Rita. Thanks, Garth.
That's right.
Thanks, Conway.
And that's right.
On that, and so it's wonderful. It keeps the format fresh. But your point, we do let people slip through the cracks. Patti Loveless has slipped through the crack.
Patti Loveless, yeah.
I've always tell everybody there's no such thing as a bad Patti Loveless album. There
is not. I agree with you 100%. I mean, and we all want it. We all would like to see her again. I mean, we're like, there's some people come back and you're like, oh, okay. But she's one that I think is still spoken of in hushed tones by everybody who says her name, smiles, or just like, she made an impact. And I don't know that she's even been able to feel that, the amount of impact she made.
I don't think she has either. I 100% agree with you on that. I used to kid with her back in her heyday. She was my girlfriend, but only one of us knew about it. Right?
I love it. Yes.
And and I would kid her about it and stuff like that. And it's like, you're not my girlfriend because physically you're a beautiful woman. You're my girlfriend because I listen to you and me and you are together. Right?
Yeah. We know each other. Yeah.
Right. And that's what you're looking at. But you can go through a whole list of people. They brought Tanya Tucker back a little bit, but Glenn Campbell disappeared in the ranks. You know? we forgot Glenn Campbell, and you can just go. I can think of people off the. Thank God we brought Charlie Pride back right before he died.
Absolutely. I was just thinking that. I hadn't said it, but I was thinking the same thing. I'm so glad we did do that, or someone did that, because, I mean, again, that guy, talk about knocking down doors, paying some dues. I mean,
he was amazing, and I've told this story. He and one of the highlights of my life, Jimmy Allen, who's a friend, and I told him before. I said, I love Charlie Pride. That would be. He goes, I know Charlie. I said, if you can ever get Charlie to come on the air with me, dude, that's all I'd ever ask. And so I'm on the air one morning, and hotline rings. Well, actually, Nate, who you know, Nate sent a text, says, answer the damn phone. You're doing radio. You're doing a million things.
You're working, right? Yeah.
Answer the damn phone. And I'm like, okay. And I punch up the phone, and it's Jimmy. And he goes, we need to go on the air right now. I'm like, what? He goes, whatever you're doing, shut it off and need to go on the air right now. And I'm like, okay. And so I potted up, and I'm like, hey, Jimmy Allen's here. He goes, Gary, say hello to Mr. Charlie Pride. And I went, wow. Charlie Pride? And he goes, how? And he's, the totally recognizable, iconic voice of Charlie Pride comes on the line.
Yeah.
And he goes, what's your name again? I said, Gary Scott Thomas. He goes, Gary Scott Thomas. And I said, Mr. Pride, you have to understand something right now. My parents are in heaven rejoicing because Charlie Pride said their son's name.
Yes, that's right.
And it was because, and I never get nervous talking to anybody unless my parents thought they were stars. And the beautiful thing about Charlie Pride, I've said this thing before. I grew up in South Alabama. I grew up in the heart of racism. I had racists in my family. My father was a racist, but not a brave racist. He was only a racist around when nobody was around, right?
Yeah.
But he loved Charlie Pride. He adored Charlie Pride, and he would constantly be singing Kiss an Angel, Good Morning, and all of this stuff. And I sit back, and I didn't tell Charlie that because at that time he was old and not hearing everything, and not. I didn't realize he had probably less than a month to live. But I've said this before. I wrote this thing and said what Charlie Pride did was break down racism in the places he didn't know he broke it down. That a racist white man in South Alabama could so love his music that he would face the wrath of his other racist family members.
Amen.
And sing Kiss an Angel, Good Morning. And take whatever slings and arrows were coming that way. And I'm like, wouldn't we all love to have that impact? Where you have an impact, you don't even know you're having the impact.
Yeah. It's a threat. It's some path that wasn't there that now is, that, like you're saying, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful, what an incredible compliment to him. I mean, and he did that for a lot of people. He did it for a lot of the whole genre, really.
And you know what I love? Right? I love that he died an insanely rich and successful man.
Yes,
he was a part owner of the Rangers. He's a part owner of the Texas Rangers.
That's crazy.
And he was married to his high school sweetheart and was just fabulously successful and fabulously wealthy. Wow. And so many of those asshats who wouldn't play a show with him died broken in the bottle. And not that I'm vindictive, but
well, it comes around, doesn't it? Yeah. But again, you feed what's the old saying about you feed the good dog or the bad dog? You feed that bad dog, that's the one that's going to get you, and he always seemed to be feeding the good dog. When we first moved to town, there was a little place called Vittles in Brentwood, and we went in and we were sitting there. We'd only been living here a month or so. And I looked over and I said, Jen, I swear to you, that's Eddie Arnold. And she said, because she's a little younger than me, who's Eddie Arnold? And so then we had a marital moment there where we explained Eddie Arnold, but I did bother him. I did go over as he was leaving and just say, you don't know me, but thank you. And I grew up, my grandfather, I didn't say it to him, but my grandfather had the 8 tracks. He had he loved Eddie Arnold's music. And so I got to say thank you to Eddie Arnold.
I don't know who Eddie Arnold was. He was probably, maybe, arguably the biggest country singer in the 1950s and early 1960s.
Yeah.
Easily.
Smooth, kind of crooner.
Well, it was back in the orchestral time. It was the Ray Price. It was the what's the name of the guy? Jim Reeves, right?
Jim Reeves, yes.
It was that sound with violins.
Yeah,
and he was also did the cattle call. But he was insanely wealthy because he invested in everything.
Yeah, they said he owned a lot of what became Brentwood, Tennessee.
Yeah, and he was just insanely wealthy. I hope he enjoyed the recognition, right? Because at that time, like you said, your wife had no idea who he was, and I'd be willing to bet that the majority of people in Nashville probably didn't know who he was.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, that's right. But yeah, he was very nice. But he and his wife, he would, I guess, take his wife to this place quite often, and I saw him in there a few more times, but I never bothered him again. But I always was just like, and I'm that way about older songwriters too. Just to be honest, I'm a pretty big fan. So, like, I was fortunate to meet Nora Wilson, most beautiful girl in the world.
Yeah.
So I met him. He produced my first cut. He and Buddy Cannon produced that record, and so I got to meet him. And he would have breakfast at this little place called Vandyland. And so me and other new writers would go eat there just to see if he'd talk to us sometimes. And sometimes he'd sit down and tell us stories or encourage us or what are you doing today? Or how's it going there? And he was very, very kind, and so was Buddy. Buddy Cannon's still rocking, but Buddy had been that way. And I got to write with Whispering Bill, which was big, and met Mac Davis several times and was a huge Mac Davis fan.
Oh, so, man. Those are great names because you brought up Nora Wilson. Maybe think Charlie Rich. And
Charlie Rich, the
world. And that's another one that's fallen through the cracks. Nobody ever plays that song. We do a Throwback Thursday, and every now and then I'll whip it out and stuff like that. But you want to talk about tortured soul? Charlie Rich was a tortured soul.
Tortured soul. And he lights the thing, the John Denver thing.
John Denver thing.
Yeah, so he kind of was angry dude, right? Yeah, that's what they say. With Tom T. Hall passing in the last year or so, when we first were moving here, I had to drive from here to Texas, and so I got the Tom T. Hall box set, and I might have almost driven my wife crazy with it, but I loved every minute of it. But I had this picture of Tom T. Hall, and you remember the big songs, but when you heard the box set, you realized like there was inside him a real like social justice, kind of an anger that he was writing. A lot of Vietnam songs, a lot of, he's coming. It's like comedians, they say comedians are sometimes anger made appropriate. And he was that way. He would turn it into art, but there was a knife in it too. And I hadn't remembered that, in learning the songs when I was young. But as I listened to it now, I was like, oh, golly, I didn't realize he was really saying things and trying to, and some of it was not subtle. It's a writer thing.
He was, bless his heart. And I always sit back and say, there's a couple of people who prove you don't have to sing to sing,
That's right.
And Tom Paul couldn't sing.
No.
He was. Julie likes to. My honor partner likes to charitably say, "Well, he's a stylist."
Oh, nice! It's a tone. It's a tone.
I like to think Willie Nelson is a stylist.
A stylist.
I said, you listen to Willie Nelson before 1990, and he could sing, but you lose a lung and see how well.
See how you're doing.
Because when
all the songs
and singing "Angel Too Close to the Ground," it's a beautiful song. If you hear him do it now, he can only speak a few words at a time. If you had only fallen, and I'd only found you, and that's what he does, right? But it's the iconic. By God, there's Willie Nelson. Right?
There he is, bigger than anybody. I mean, but again, amazing that I have never met him, but I would need to have my wife just ready to pull me back, because I'd be pretty excited to meet him. He's, but it is one of those things. I think we talked about this once. The Waylon Jennings quote I read from the early '90s, where they were saying, well, he's over at Combine Music, and you've got Roger Miller and Johnny Cash is over there, and Waylon's over there. Shel Silverstein's coming into town. Chris Christopherson writes there. So they're all in that house at Combine Music. And so someone says to Waylon, well, there must have been a lot of competition between you guys. And Waylon said, no, not really any competition, though we did like to impress each other a little bit. And I thought, that's the best way to say that. No, not competition. No, though.
we do want to impress each other. Yeah. Well, if you're Willie Nelson, no matter what anybody else does, you just pick up your microphone and go, crazy. Mic drop.
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to do that.
And they always are kind of hiding the history of him doing those albums with the Chet Atkins. I mean, that should have worked, and it didn't. And that's also, I always like, don't gloss that part of the story. He's working and working and working, and it isn't working, and he ends up back in Texas for reasons, And I do think that's part of the beautiful part of that story too. Maybe it's just a little ahead of it. Maybe it wasn't 100% Will. I don't know what it was, but then he comes roaring back. Holy smokes.
Well, it's to me, following the Willie Nelson story, because I love country music history, as you can imagine, he left because it wasn't working. And he went back to Texas and got rid of the suits and stopped slicking his hair down and said, by God, I'll just play honky tonks and dress the way I want to dress. And the beautiful thing of it is by leaving Nashville came to him.
That's right. Came to him. Yeah.
And Waylon, the same thing. I mean, they had their sound that they wanted to create. And I think that's the beautiful thing about today's music with the internet, as horrible as the internet can be. It creates an avenue for people to figure out what they do and how they
Absolutely.
And it's very cool where you've seen, in the Eddie Arnold days, you came to town and they told you what to wear and what to sing and who to hang out with. And I think, let's be honest, George Jones and Tammy Wynette were crazy as bed bugs. And I think part of it was being so controlled. Everything had to be so controlled. Where nowadays you do have that freedom. I mean, okay, talk about. I'm going to tie this into one of your songs that I'm so glad Charlie Pride had a chance to know how appreciated he was. My favorite song, and I tell this to his face every time. The moment you leave this out of the show, I will not come to your show anymore. Is 1994. I tell Aldine that.
No way.
The moment you stop doing 1994, I'm tagging out. And he's like, I love that song. And I'm like, I know. And I'm so glad. I hope Joe Diffie heard it for the cultural touchstone that it was.
Yeah. We wrote it, and Luke and Thomas Rhett and I were writing. And we'd spent all day on something else. And it was probably 2 or 3 o'clock, and we didn't want to cut loose, but we knew the song we were working on wasn't working. And so Luke just played a loop for Thomas Rhett, and he just started singing and mumbling. And somewhere in there, I said, did you say 1994? And TR said, my dad was on the radio in 94. And Luke had a shirt, and he had a Tracy Lawrence T-shirt under his flannel. And he goes, Tracy Lawrence, like that. And I said, yes, but also Mark Chestnut, Joe Diffie. I mean, a lot of things are happening in 94 that are really good things. So somewhere in there, I believe it was TR that sort of was playing around and did the Joe like that. And I just thought it was so fun. And so we just wrote it really quickly. And we made a little horrible demo, just a little guitar, a little yelling. I played bass on it. That tells you how weird it was. And then I sent it to Luke and Thomas. Thomas sends it to his dad. His dad is on a bus, I don't know where they were, with Joe Diffie and Sammy Kershaw. And he plays it, and the report we got back was that Joe Diffie loved it. And of course, Sammy was a little irritated that he had not been referenced, I'm sure. And he should have been. Very fair. He should have been referenced. And so then, and that was a Friday. So on Monday, Luke and I were in the studio doing demos, with the band and everything. And he said, "Hey, I got a call. I'm supposed to go play songs for Aldine and Michael Knox, his producer, at lunch." And so I said, "No problem. I'll take this." And I said, "What are you going to play?" He goes, "I don't know." And I got to tell you, I'd been gunning for Aldine since record one. I mean, I loved the way he sounded. And I thought, Amarillo Sky was, such a great Rodney Clawson, such a great song. And, anyway, but I hadn't any luck. I had a lot of holds and no cuts. So he goes to lunch and he comes back and Luke's just giggling. He's so excited, Luke Laird. And, he goes, "I walked in and Michael Knox said, 'You got anything that's got a beat or has some sort of a cool vibe that's different?' And he goes, so I played him, 1994. And I said, 'From Friday?' And he was like, 'Yeah, I just played that little work tape.' And I said, 'Oh man, there's no way.' He goes, 'Listen, he made me play it for him 3 or 4 times in a row. Just play that again. Play that again.' And then he just said, 'I think we're going to cut that.' And I said, 'They're going to cut that?' And sure enough, they cut it. And then Michael Knox brings it over and plays it for us. And so it was a real gift, But we kept thinking maybe Joe would come out on stage with him and he's kind of, I guess, in the video briefly. And there was a big set dressing that had Joe Diffie in his truck. And I know that he did it live a few times himself at some of his shows.
Did he?
He did it. I got some. Yeah, a couple of times he played. I got a clip from somebody saying Diffie's doing it. He kind of was like demure in a way, but some people said, "Oh, will you help me?" And they were all like, Joe, Diffie." It was the funniest. It's one of those deals where we wouldn't have drawn it up that way. We didn't think we were writing a song that Jason Aldean would record. We were just laughing and having fun, and that's just our remembrance of the darn thing. It was like. But we had so much fun remembering the songs and, all of us, the 3 of us writing it. That's really what the gift was of the whole thing. And then, of course, I was like, "Oh, I feel bad. We should have probably put a little more." But every now and then we'll say, "Oh, we ought to put a little more. Mark Chestnut should have been on the ride or somebody else should have been on the ride." But that's how it went down.
I love it because when you say it, yes, it's what we call a list song, right?
Yeah,
the ultimate list song is Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire." And all it is one little list, and then "We Didn't Start the Fire." And to this day, I have no idea what the hell it means. I was in pop radio out, and I remember going, "What is this? What is it? It is nothing." If you think about it, it is truly nothing. And
TR is throwing out that "Truck is a Time Machine" and all that. He just like freestyled that. I mean, and we were just screaming. We just were, sometimes people think we're having fun and we're not. That was the case where we were laughing and we were just having the best time. And when he dropped that thing about the truck as a time machine, we were howling with laughter, like, do it. And it really was, it happened quick and went a long way.
You guys have to look at it. I will pull it out every now and then, like on a Friday for sure, just to get everybody in that weekend, because the moment you hear it, bang, and it just goes. And I don't think I've ever heard Aldean sound like he's having more fun. It just feels like he's having the best time. I saw him do it at Shoreline, and he was just having the best time. And the crowd, you're exactly Joe. And I just love. Tricia Yearwood told me this great story about Joe Diffie. She goes, the best thing? She goes, I recorded something with him one time. And he would literally sit outside the studio and chain smoke cigarettes and then walk in, put his headphones on, nail it. And she goes, I grew up in a family of smokers. They all would hack. Their voice would get wacky and stuff. Yeah. And she goes, Joe would just go in and hit every note and everything crystal clear. And she goes,
I had no idea.
She goes, I was stunned. And when she's telling me the story, I said, okay, here's what we need to remember. That's Tricia Yearwood saying that. What those beautiful voices in the world in the history of country music is going, I was shocked by him. And she goes, oh, he was so good. He was so good. And I'm like,
she's on my bucket list, Trisha Yearwood. I mean, she's
just got that, man. She's just got that. It just, it is so amazing. And her register was always good to me. And I loved her upper register, but I think her lower register never got the due. Her lower register was so melodious. It was so warm, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, like the new, and again, I'm not comparing or critiquing anybody, but like the new, as we tape this, Carrie Underwood's Ghost Story is out, right? And there's a part where she actually finally goes down and hangs in her lower register. And it's good. Yeah. It's Carrie Underwood. It's Carrie Underwood. But it doesn't carry that warmth that Trisha Yearwood has.
Yeah, I've wondered about that too. It's interesting you say this because I was talking with somebody the other day and we were like, because we talk about Trisha Yearwood, and I know like Garth Fundus is a great producer, did all the Don Williams stuff and produced a lot of great Trisha Yearwood records as well. And we were like, was it that the sound systems of that time and the way we were listening, I remember in the late 80s cassettes, and a lot of high end, a lot of emphasis on the sizzle. And I wonder now if she would almost speak better because now I've got my headphones on or whatever. And I can really be right up next to that warmth, and the way PAs are now. I've just thought, I bet it would really hammer now because because then there was a lot of emphasis on that high frequency. Yeah. Here's some of those mixes from the late 80s and they're just shrill. And I loved it.
Those compressors on and stuff like that. Yeah. It's when you sit back and think about Trisha Yearwood, like I said, it's everybody knows the hits and that stuff, and that's great. But the songs that slip through, you forget. Grant, the song Remembers When, which seems like in one. But again, her ability to warm that lower register,
Yeah.
And the same thing like Walk Away Joe. Her ability, she let Henley handle the high part.
Yes.
She stayed in that warm register, which I think that's what separated her to me.
Yeah. And there was a song that Tom Douglas wrote with Harlan Howard. I think it was called Melancholy Blue. It was not a single, but it's on one of the albums there, and as things were changing over. But man, that song is another case where she's just, it's so warm. If you ever hear it, it holds you, but but it didn't maybe get the due that it deserved, but she's something. And I, from all reports I've heard and everything I've heard from her, it hasn't changed at all. No. It's still just lethal.
Amazing. She is, she is stunning. We had, in December, we had Garth play our dive bar.
No way.
In December. And we 750 tickets you had to listen to win. And it was amazing. It was the most amazing thing you've ever seen. But I secretly was hoping, come on, Trisha, come on. But he's like, no, this is just a hitch. He literally flew in, did the show, flew out, and he goes, Mama, don't travel like that. I travel like that. Man, Mama, don't travel like that.
I bet that was incredible, though, in that room, because he is just so powerful. I bet he was something in a room that size.
He was supposed to do an hour. He did over 90 minutes because he was having such a fun time. And his people told us, they said, because, he goes, listen, I've got new songs, but you're not here to listen to the new songs. Let's just all sit back and sing along for the next hour. And he ended up singing along for the next hour and a half. And I have, I've done radio for, I don't like to say the years. I've done it down to the hours. I've done it for over 36,000 hours, right?
Wow.
That's how much time I've been on the radio.
That's right.
I've seen a zillion shows. My first concert, I'll have to ask you this too. My first concert, you know what? I'm going to take a quick break and I'm going to tell you what my first concert is. We'll be right back with Barry Dean. It's time to think differently when it comes to your parties, meetings, and groups. The catering from Havana Cuba restaurant in downtown San Jose. Instead of the same old, how about the most delicious Cuban sandwich you've ever had? You're tired of fries? Plantains, my friends, they'll change your world. And here's something you didn't know. Havana Cuba was voted one of the top 10 tamales in the entire South Bay. They have vegan, vegetarian, and gluten-free options, and their website is 998cuba.com. They're located at 387 South 1st Street in downtown San Jose. It's Havana Cuba. That's called a tease. So my first concert was when I was 9 years old, and I went to Red Level, Alabama, in a field, and there was a flatbed truck, and on the flatbed truck was Porter Wagoner and Dolly Parton.
Wow. Oh, my gosh.
In late August, it had to be 1,000,000 degrees. And Porter had on his nudie suit and Dolly had on the regalia. And what I remember was thinking, it's so hot and I could not see them sweat. They were doing the show, by gosh. They were
running the show.
And so I've seen a lot of concerts is my point. There will nothing ever touch Garth Brooks at our little Club Rodeo dive bar. Nothing.
Wow. No. Wow. That is strong.
Yeah. That's that was very cool. That was a wonderful legacy because, we're now streaming. We just do KRTY.com. So we're off the FM signal, but it was a wonderful way to go off because nobody will ever touch it.
No, you can't. No, there's nothing. I mean, to imagine how powerful he is. I mean, the records that have been broken and the songs people know, and it's just unreal how many people he's touched, just traveling about. I mean, these shows are, what do you do? 2-3 nights here in the stadium?
Yeah.
And they could have sold it out again. I mean, it's just a question of how many days he wants to hang out, really. He can sell it out every night.
Do you see where he's going to stop doing stadium shows? He's going to stop. He's going to stop doing touring. And the whole thing is he goes, I realized over the time how much I enjoy being home, and touring is easy on me. It is brutal on my crew. So he goes, I will do one-off shows, but we're not going to tour. Now, knowing Garth, I bet you he's still paying them.
Yeah, I would bet so too.
Right?
I mean, he seems like a great guy. I've shook his hand a couple of times. He's been very nice. And I tried to send him a water balloon slingshot once. So our Creative Nations publishing office, we're on those houses, right? Yeah, on Music Row.
Uh-huh.
So Creative Nation has these 2 houses, and we just had the one at the time. And next door was a publishing company-ish thing, and it looked like they were going to sell. So Luke Laird and Beth were talking to the owners and, trying to negotiate, hey, we might could buy that little house. But on the other side of that house is the studio where Garth has cut every record he's ever made. And so he bought that studio and was refurbishing and, doing things to that building. And I mean, that's some major records that have been cut there. And so this house sits between them. And so one day I came in and there were a lot of people next door, like crews, people going to do some construction and things. And I said, did you guys buy the house next door? No, I think Garth came in and offered him $1 million for the house. And I said to my friend Luke Laird, because I'm this guy, I said, you ought to try to outbid him. And but he was wise and didn't do that. But so they're right next door, and I tell that to say, so I was riding with Holly Williams one day. Yeah. She was going to come to the office, Hank's daughter, Hank Jr., and she is incredibly talented and does just almost everything well. And but all of a sudden, there's a knock at the front door of our office, and there stands Garth Brooks with Holly Williams, and he said, Holly had walked into that house and he was standing there and he knew her. He had remembered her. Oh, Holly, how are you? Oh, I'm here to write next door with Barry Dean. So I think they're next door. He walked her over to our office. So I did write him a card, and I got him one of those things where people hold the thing and you can shoot a water balloon like 300 feet.
Yeah.
And I sent a note over with this thing and said, hey, I figure you're the guy who has everything, but do you have one of these And did you know that if you stood on your porch and shot it across the street, you could hit the window of Carla Wallace at Big Yellow Dog? I was hoping to start a little, community building, a little community building activity, but I never heard from him. So I think he doesn't like water balloons or something. But no, he probably never saw it. But
somebody saw this and said, "This is so damn cool." And Garth doesn't need one of these. He could go buy one his own self.
That's right. There's a fourth grader in Franklin. He's having a great time with it, just doing all kinds of stuff.
And that's the thing. Somebody said once upon a time, he can't be that nice. It's an act. And my response, as long as Julie's has always been, that it's a damn great act and we should all copy.
That's right. That's right. He's, it is one of those things where people seem to want to turn a notch out of people that do good things. And he's done a lot of good things, and I've only met him then. And one other time in a studio I was walking through, he was as kind as he could be. He was thoughtful to everyone in the room. And so, I don't know. I've not heard anything bad about him. Only good
times. And I remember we were doing what he was doing his comeback album. And we were in Texas Stadium where the Cowboys play, where this Garth event. And you sat down and interviewed him. And I sit back and I said, "Let me tell you the best thing you ever did." He's like, "Man," I said, "You have taught one, going on two, and entering your third generation of country singers how to do this game, how to do it, how to live it, how to survive it." I said, "That's the most amazing thing you've done, where you've turned it into these people know, let's super serve the fans. Let's work in partnership with radio. Let's be damn nice about it while we're at it." And now Garth will call you on the carpet if he thinks you've done wrong. That's the best thing about Garth. And if you've insulted him, I remember the old story that this station had done years ago, Garth Free Radio. And they came up and wanted him to do a liner, at CRS or something. And he looked at him and said, "No, absolutely not. No." And so he remembers all that. He's paying attention to it. But you look at how these kids act now. I mean, the truth of it is, Merle Haggard, Waylon for the most part, a lot of Willie Nelson, those were 3, 4, 5, 6 marriages, drug abuse, alcoholism, and that was the word that, all of those men died kind of broken, with the exception of Willie, and he's hanging on, but they all kind of died broken. I remember meeting Johnny Cash. The drugs had fried his brain, really. And it was meet and greet. You sit back and you talk to June. June would do all the talking, and Johnny just stood there. And so there was a price they paid for living that life, and the touring and was all that stuff. But nobody had taught them, here's the way to navigate it. And I said, you've taught these kids how to navigate. They don't do groupies anymore. They bring their kids with them. They literally bring their families with them. They bring their trainers and their nutritionists, and they, I can't tell you how many times somebody said, "Hey, so-and-so's looking for something to do. What do you recommend before their show tonight?" Right. And that was the Garth thing of, let's bring the family. Let's do something with the crew. Let's not bring in outside influences. And I said, that literally is the most important thing you've ever done.
That's so true. I think you're right.
And it's so cool. And I'll tell you the story about the night about we had the dive bar show, right? So we're all backstage and the crowd's out there going crazy. And Garth walks in. We're in the back. I don't know if you've ever been to Club Rodeo, but there's a entrance from the back in the street. Garth walks in from the street and we're all standing there. And he goes, "Hey, everybody." And he walks up to us and he goes, "Are y'all happy with how this went? Are y'all okay with how this went?"
Wow.
It was never of, "Hey, I'm here. What's going on?" It was like, "Are y'all?" That was literally the first words out of his mouth. "Are y'all happy with how it went? Are you good with it?" And we're just like, "Yes, please." And it was just amazing. And I'm like, that kind of response makes you run through walls for people. Garth will always have a space in country music and country radio and country in general because of the way he's treated people.
Wow, that's so cool. I mean, Yeah, not that he's gone down, but they say you go down the way you go up, and he's really showing he may not ever come down because of how he went up. It's beautiful.
And he may never get
Beautiful.
another hit, and he'll still sell out stadium shows 2 or 3 at a time.
Oh, he's beloved. But he grew the whole tent. He made it. They always say the rising tide lifts up. Well, he's the ocean. I mean, that era, he sort of was that thing that sort of, and there were other people, as I recall, kicking, I remember the first time I heard the Judds and Randy Travis, and, that was a real, like, a friend of mine played me Randy Travis. And I was really listening to, at that point, pop music, rock music, that's where I was doing it. And then he played that first. Well, I don't know if it was his first Randy Travis. It's the Randy Travis record with He Walked on Water on it.
Yeah.
And he played that song, and I was like, all of a sudden that called back to what I loved, about country music. And but I was thinking, obviously because of the situation, but that first Judds record, those first few Judds albums, just sounded so different, right? They were just a different thing, and I remember hearing those the first time.
Yeah, Randy Travis, again, was one of those saving country music situations. Right?
Yeah.
I told him that. I said, and I told him that years ago. I said, you don't get the credit due because you saved it. And the Judds, loved them then. Of course, we didn't find out till later how truly chaotic that life was.
Yeah, that's right.
And you do. We talked earlier about slipping through the cracks. People forget there was a time where Garth, Alan Jackson, Clint Black were all at the same level. They were the 3-headed monster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clint Black Still in Time. You forget
so big.
How big that album was. You forget Clint Black was everywhere, and he was on par with Garth. Alan Jackson, he was right there, hit after hit after hit after hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then Garth and his ability to do the live show and take it to a place where country music, and he'll be the first to tell you, he was doing a rock show for country.
Yeah.
And to be able to get it to that level separated him. And then, as we always kid, the thing with Clint Black is, damn it, he got happy.
Yeah. All of a sudden he was happy.
And then, once he got happy, he didn't know how to fill that lane. He just really...
That's right. He wasn't leaving anything. He was happy. And he could still sing and play, but he was just too dang happy.
Well, he's on that, what's he call it? The Hits and Mrs. Tour? It's the Hits and Mrs. Tour. And they're happy, and I don't think he would change a thing. And Alan, bless his heart for his health challenges, but my God, again, talk about falling through the cracks. And as a songwriter, I mean, Alan Jackson's ability to craft a song and to picture. Remember when Daddy Drive, Drive for Daddy Jean. I mean, talk about a canvas and just.
He did an album of hymns that I love too, where he's just singing. But there's this way he does things. And going back to the older writers and the writers that are still the Buddy Cannon and Nora Wilson and those kinds of, Bob McDill is a classic example of that. And, just so many of these great writers. Alan Jackson's one of those where he doesn't look like he's breaking a sweat with his writing. It's, it's just moving and he just sings it. There's a melody, there are words, and it acts as if it's always existed. And a lot of times I'll play in those rounds. I played a round once with Buddy Cannon, Whispering Bill Anderson, and Bobby Bear Sr. I can only assume someone just chickened out. And then they were like, well, who's the sucker? Barry Dean's the sucker. Because I certainly did not have the firepower to sit in that round at the Bluebird. But I showed up because I wanted a seat. I wanted to see it. And I wanted to meet Bobby Bear Sr. too. And plus I'd do anything Buddy Cannon said. I'd run through a wall. So I showed up and let's not even kid around. I mean, I had a water pistol, as they say. And but you're watching them do these songs, and Buddy Cannon's doing Set 'Em Up Joe, and and Whiskey Lullaby, Bill's doing, and so Memphis from Bobby Bear, and I'm over here using every chord I got and filling every space with syllables of word. I mean, I'm saying all the words I can. I'm throwing adjectives around like I'm a drunk monk. It was bad, monkey with a machine gun. But I'm using syllables, and they're just over there, not just, buddy's like, set 'em up, Joe, and you're just like, how do I get that good? How do I learn to write? And Alan Jackson is a guy who writes songs that just feel like they've always been there in a great way. Just like, he just
that's such a wonderful way of describing it. I feel like a song always been there.
It's always been there. Sometimes I'll say they sound, when you listen to them, you're not thinking about how they weren't built. They were created. You're not going, oh, I know what you're going to do here. I see it, or that's a piece of business. It's just like, Remember When? It's just like, oh yeah, I always wanted to say that. I just didn't know how, that kind of a thing.
And just, and the music, because I'm just, how did you think about doing the little ukulele mandolin, and it just sets, from that first moment, it sets the haze of memory, right?
Yeah.
And there's Set 'Em Up Joe. First of all, Vern Gosdin, another voice that's fallen through the cracks.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
I mean, Vern Gosdin is one thing chiseled in stone. Chiseled in stone is possibly in the top 20 of country songs all time. Top 20. And if you put it in the top 10, I would not be offended. I would not be offended. But there's Set 'Em Up Joe, it just is a guy in a bar. They got a vintage Victrola 1961 full of my favorite records that I grew up on, Yeah. And I love the fact the last thing when it Set 'Em Up Joe and play Walk in the Floor, Set 'Em Up Joe and play Walk in the Floor. I said, Set 'Em Up Joe. I just think of that because I
just knew you needed it. Yeah.
I would never have thought of it, that it comes back in on those eighth notes. I said, and it's like, wow.
So good.
So
that is, and boy, that's the thing. I read once that Johnny Cash had given Roseanne Cash a list of 100 of the most he thought were the best country songs, or the best songs. And that she's written about a few of them. And, but you should make us a playlist as well, because I would love to just study that. There's a lot of them. You think we are blessed in country music because maybe it's, because we're telling stories of everybody, but we have a rich amount of songs and I know like artists now are supposed to write their own songs, but there is a part of me sometimes that goes, yeah, but that person sings so well. Bonnie Raitt only generally writes 4 songs on her record, and then she collects what she thinks are her favorite songs. I just know when I go out and hear these, even like I go hear these young writers, and they blow my mind. I mean, because they're bringing so many influences in, and you'll hear one and think, I have been trying to write that song my whole life and I didn't even know it, Well, even fun songs especially, like, what's that one that Chris Jansen, when he did that Buy Me a Boat thing.
Oh yeah.
We're all like, how did we miss that?
Well, here's the thing. You can't talk. You cannot talk, Barry, because who in the world would have said, hey, how about a pontoon? Y'all, what do you think? How about a pontoon? Everybody write a song about a pontoon, and let's have the biggest song of the year, possibly in the last 5 years, that redefined who Little Big Town was.
That's funny. Yeah, well, Natalie Hamby walked in and said it, but Luke and I had to talk her into writing it, but she said it, and we were like, and again, we kind of thought, well, surely that's been done, and then we Googled it, and it hadn't, and so then I was like, can we run, but we had no idea. And I have to say, Little Big Town and Jay Joyce, the producer, and Jed Hughes played that riff. He put that in there, and, that made it really cool. They made it all sexified and everything. When I sing it, it sounds like, that does sound like an older boat. But when they sing it, it's like, oh, sexy on the water. Got it. And
Hey, let me tell you, I've said this and I've said it on the air, the most underrated song and the song that should have been a bigger hit, and I love it to pieces. Brothers Osborne and Rum. I'm telling you what, that song is so good. And if you're out in the summer, if you're hanging out on the pontoon or if you're just wherever you're at, put Rum on your playlist. I'm telling you,
wow.
and nobody hears Rum and goes, well, that sucks. I mean, it's just perfect on so many levels.
That's so nice. Thank you. I love those guys. I've known them since before they were doing their duo, and so we were writing, and that whole song really is just one chord. They're musically doing all kinds of things over because Jon alone is just such a great guitar player. But it really, I mean, if you were a beginning guitar student, you could just play a D chord all the way through, and you'd be fine the whole song. And it's in a way it's the simplest tune. But I was trying to get at, my wife had told me, you ought to do a song that has like a oh or a mm. And then you get in the room with TJ and he's got that massive voice. And so, and there had been at that time, there were a lot of beer songs were happening a lot.
Yeah.
And there were quite a bit of whiskey was happening right there. And I just thought, I said, you guys feel like, I was just trying to be funny. You guys feel like writing a song about rum and TJ, rum. And I heard the and I went, what if you did rum, and then they off they went, so I just hanging on. But it was so much fun to write that song. And then I was so worried for him because that was that first single. And I thought, I hope they get another single. And, so we got top 20, but not as high as we need to get. And, but that next single helped them jump ahead, but they're great. And thank you for liking that song. That's funny. And that's one I hardly ever try. Because I always feel like, he can play, both of them can play all these cool things, but I always feel like I'm just strumming that chord.
I always remember because we had him at the Gilroy Garlic Festival. It's amazing.
Garlic.
We had at the Gilroy Garlic Festival. We had Rascal Flatts at the Gilroy Garlic Festival.
Wow.
We had Charlie Pierce. We had Michael Ray, not together.
Yeah, probably best.
Aren't. At the Gilroy Garlic Festival, what I remember about Gilroy, because it was so hot, and they're doing this song, and they're up there singing, and they just finished the song, and the guitars and drums hadn't stopped ringing yet from the end of the song, and TJ goes, "So can anybody get me a damn beer?" And all of a sudden,
filter.
Oh, you shouldn't have said that, because all of a sudden you just had dozens of people in the next 20 minutes running up and bringing beer to the stage.
That's great.
I'm like going, oh, dude.
That's great. I could so see him doing that too. He just just lay it out there. He was just all over it. I asked you for an hour, and I'm not going to take any more advantage of your time because, frankly, I could go 2 hours with you. Oh man, I love anytime I can be on. I want to be on because I like talking to you. I always learn something from you. So.
Well, I just love talking, and I didn't even get around to talking about, because I wanted to talk about all the different people you've written with. I wanted to get your impressions on that. I want to go down farther, and I'll make my list of the top 10 songs, and you make your list of the top 10 songs. And
right.
I would love to just explore that and talk about some of the things that maybe of what happened and how did it go, or what was the story you heard? Because I love country music, and I really love studying the history of it, because the people in it, I think nationally country music isn't that cute. That's the attitude I get. Isn't that cute? But you're not doing real stuff. And I'd be willing to say some of the most impactful, legendary songs are in country music.
Oh, yeah. I think you're exactly right. Yeah.
About it is, we remember Rock Around the Clock and Maybelline, but they didn't mean anything. They were iconic, but they didn't mean anything. And I think songs that truly meant stuff, this is where literature lives. You may not think it, but it's where literature lives.
I do think it is blue. I always say blue collar poetry, and sometimes it almost feels like haiku when it's done right. Like it's just, it doesn't look like, if you look at it, there's no fancy words, but what it's saying is so big. It just owns you. And I'll put together a little list of some songs that are at least quirky list of 10 great songs, and
hey, listen,
I tell you what,
trailers for sale are at rooms to let 50 cents. I mean, paint a picture. And this guy turns around and rips your heart out with Husbands and Wives.
Husbands and Wives is what I was thinking of. Just like that, what genre is that gives you a song like Husbands and Wives? And it's a hit again for Brooks and Dunn. And somebody could sing it right now and it would be true to us, in that moment. It's just, that song alone is just a machine,
Wouldn't you? I'd be interested to hear what Maren Morris would sound like singing that.
Oh, I love that idea. I may text her and say, "Hey, Gary had a great idea. You could at least sing it on his podcast."
Yeah, do the podcast with me.
You have incredible guests. By the way, I was listening. You've had all kinds of guests on there. I felt like the least qualified visitor to your establishment here.
I've been having so much fun, but yeah, you were one of my big gets, and I'm going to make you arm twist Luke Laird.
Oh, I'll do it. I think I'm going to see him tonight. I'll give him some pressure on it. So,
tell him it's him, because I love you guys. And to be honest, singers are fun. And I love talking to singers. I really do. And I don't mean this to besmirch anybody, but songwriters are where you get to have the cool conversations.
We live in a different little room. So do you. We're in the little rooms, right? Not in the big rooms, right?
That's it. Yeah. Life in the Little Room. Maybe that's the name of our book, Barry.
That's the book, Life in the Little Room. Because it really is a different energy, right? When they're tired and they sit down with you and probably plop down and grab a pillow if there's a couch, and just, that's their moment to breathe, and they're kind of tired. And we have the same experience in the writing room. They're a little tired, but they're getting ready for the big thing. But where they got this thing they're going to do with us, and we get to see both people at the same time, kind of John Cash and Johnny Cash.
Next time you come on, I told my wife was, because I was talking about how I was going to be talking to you, and my wife was telling some friends, and she goes, I grew up with Barry. I may or may not have had a crush on him. And she goes, don't tell him that. And I said, shut up.
Well, she was the sweetest. She was very kind, and that her family was really kind. And so, yeah, that's, but I think, I don't know if that's where they're from originally, but they had come from Tulsa, Oklahoma to Pittsburgh, Kansas. And yeah, it's amazing. And you've been so kind to us on the radio when we were coming out to play the show, letting me talk about Lucy and letting us talk about songs. And I just appreciate all of it.
We didn't get a chance to talk about Lucy, and that's
we've done it. Yeah.
Well, no, I want to get on the podcast. Literally, you can't see it, but the top line right there. Can you see it? Lucy. Lucy.
Oh, yeah. That's good. Well, we'll.
And I didn't forget to run to it because I got so involved in our conversation as we went. So the good news is we get back, and you need guys to look it up. Look up the website, LUCI. That's what I was going to tell you, why Barry's so busy. I mean, he does this songwriting thing, and then he goes and tries to make the world better by doing stuff here. So it's LUCI. It's remarkable. It's a technology that I can't believe it didn't exist until you started working on it.
No, it's been a journey. Now we're doing that investor thing. So hopefully I'll be out your way soon. I'm coming out. There's some sort of Masters of Scale conference I'm coming out to, and we were out there for a Fortune thing. And so hopefully I'll get to spend more time out there with you in that great weather and get to see you maybe. And because I've never been to the club either, by the way. I've only been to the
club, and my wife would kill to take you out to dinner or have you over for dinner. One of the other.
Oh, I'd love it. I would love it. I will do it. We will make it happen. And I'll put some pressure on Luke Laird. He's got all kinds of silly stories from those songs he's written. So we got to get him on here. I'll send you a few little secret. I may give a little information up on him. So see what happens.
All right, my friend. Until next time, when we're going to compare notes on songs.
I can't wait. All right. Take care. Thank you so much.